Welcome to the Stout Tales podcast. I'm your host, author Drayton Allen. Each week we tap into the timeless adventures of legendary beer aficionado Del Brewen as he searches the world for beer near perfection. Pull up a stool, fill up your mug, and let the fire crackle as we journey back to a simpler time when beer and ale weren't just drinks, but the closest thing to magic a humble serf could ever hope for. Stout.
The quest for beer near perfection.
Conservator's note. We have included the original introduction Del wrote in his letters here to allow the new reader to gain familiarity with Mr. Brewen's work.
My professional name is Del Brewen, Del being short for delicious. I chose this name over my given name, since it is my life's quest to seek, describe, and share my love for tasty beer. I should mention at the outset that my passion and mode of life is that of a master brewer of beers and ales. I am a connoisseur in pursuit of beer perfection. It has been my endeavor to create the first guidebook to the various brews, which the public houses and porterhouses offer in the kingdom and beyond. The narratives that accompany each beer are the story of my encounters and discoveries of these marvelous brews. I have included such hoping to make my work more than just a tedious book of beer-making methods and recipes. By telling the stories and the legends behind the beers I describe, I strive to give the flavor of the people and culture that produced the beer. In addition, I also tell of my personal experiences related to the discovery of such brews, so that the reader may discern if such has influenced my description. Before I begin, it is necessary for me to describe my stature, since people's reactions will, at times, color the story. I am of the people commonly referred to as dwarves, and events in the story might seem odd if you didn't know this. The belief that so-called dwarves are of a race different from that of average height men is a common misconception and wrong. I am the son of average height people, and my stout stature is merely an extreme among the varieties that God has in his wisdom put among all mankind. I do not feel cheated by my lot in life. Instead, I embrace it, along with the challenges and rewards it offers. Thus, I invite you to take a view of the world from a different perspective, view of what lies beneath, things that others may have overlooked. Before I go any further, I would be remiss if I did not also introduce to you my young companion, Kip Lambert. Kip is an artist of unusual ability. He is the official illustrator of my discoveries and adventures. I've enjoyed watching Kip create his drawings on our journeys, and I'm fascinated how he carefully sketches even the most mundane discovery. He can depict the various strains of barley, hops, and other ingredients in the finest detail. He has drawn much of the wonderful architecture and the unique brewing apparatuses we have seen. In addition, he's made a diligent record of several of the comely serving maids we've met along the way. I should also mention that although young Kip is a veritable wizard with chalk and ink, he sometimes lacks a sense of propriety. I have endeavored to school him in gentlemanly manners and tact. This time in which we live is one of knights and lords, of ignorance and of myth, where good stories are granted as much credence as truth. People are in general God-fearing and righteous, although there are some who heed not the preaching of the friars and lead the lives of miscreants and thieves. However, I will not glorify their waywardness, nor will I encourage those evildoers by praising their acts of villainy. Yet I do relate these to give understanding to the reader, and hope that such shall act as restraint upon a wayward heart. I hope you will enjoy my Brewmaster's Gazette and pass it along to your friends. Del Brewen, Brewmaster.
Brewmaster's Gazette, the Tale of Pallie Ale.
In this, the issue of the Brewmaster's Gazette, I shall tell a story of two beers of note, which I have featured herein. It also tells the story of how I was privileged to imbibe so rare a brew that I risked much in even telling of it. It was a pleasant day in August when Kip and I discovered, somewhat by accident, an anecdote so interesting we had to stop and track it down. Our chance meeting with a bard who goes by the unusual name of Ankle's Knees gave us our first clue about the so-named Paladin Ale. We are indebted to Ankle's Knees because ever afterward, our retelling of his stories and songs gained us more than one free drink for our trouble. It started as we sat in the great room of the Drinkety Drunken Dwarf Inn. We'd been told by a passing merchant that this inn was a good place for a bed and a brew. So despite the name and its implications for my stature, we took a detour north from our route home to lodge a night or two there and discover what we might. I should mention that Kip and I were coming back from a trip far to the east, where I'd had an opportunity to research a new strain of hops developed near the city of Mallowhedge by some secretive monks. Yet the trip's results had been a bit dubious. The new strain of hops were in fact ordinary hops, much the same as everyone else uses. The grain, however, had been specially marinated in some method or manner the monks refused to reveal. It did have a unique flavor, but I decided not to include it in my journal. The beer is not widely available, and since I had no story to share, it seemed worthless to relate. As we left, an old monk took me aside and revealed the secret in a crazy story. He said they allowed sheep to eat the grains and then induced them to regurgitate them. He claimed this softened the hulls and jump-started the fermentation process. Well, to say the least, I didn't wait around. The trip wasn't a total loss, since while I was in the area, I successfully contacted a local brewer with extensive experience. I learned several new tricks from him. One such tip was information about a cold brewing method, which utilized a freezing process. This produced a strongly spirited beer of a most powerful nature. I took extensive notes since I was planning to attempt this on a batch of my winter harvest grains. But all of that is for another time. I have wandered far from my story. So there we were in the Drinkety Drunken Dwarf Inn's great room, as I had mentioned. It was a wooden building with a large common room spread with tables and chairs and a long bar along the back wall. It smelled of countless pipes, spilled beer, and the pickled delicacies that lined the shelf beside the bar. A pot of something that resembled old stew and burned lentils bubbled on the hearth, but no one in the place seemed brave enough to partake. A second floor was visible beyond a railing above, which surrounded the upper level of the common area. The interior was dimly lit, save a few spots of daylight that filtered in from the two windows high on the south wall. The thick smoke from pipeweed and wood fire made the light's journey from window to floor a perilous one. Little of it reached us sitting upon the oaken plank benches. The servers weren't busy. They stood around the bar. Several tables were occupied with the usual daytime denizens of such alehouses. An old bard slept face in his arms. A worn-out lute leaned carelessly beside him. I caused a stir when I walked in. I always do. I doubt the Drinkety Drunken Dwarf Inn gets many actual little people as customers. It is rare and thus notable for most average height people to see a man of my size. They often stare, not usually meaning to be rude, but I have grown accustomed to the reaction since it is nearly universal. Most of the patrons in the inn return to their drinking and talking after only a moment. We found a table, and after looking at a menu, gave our order to a fine figure of a serving girl. A minute later, the thoughtful girl brought me a stool for my feet, seeing that the chair was not well suited to me. Most of the people were speaking quietly with one another, perhaps out of respect for the sleeping bard. With practiced efficiency, the barkeep served up our order. The serving girl, whose hair was red as flame, brought us our mugs filled with 2 of the house brews. We always ordered from the house special selection in hopes of finding a hidden gem to add to our collection. She set down the generously filled mugs with a friendly smile. Then she giggled. She wrapped her finger around and tugged a lock of Kip's blonde hair. As she walked away, she winked a lovely green eye at him. He was taken by surprise, and it caused him to blush in embarrassment. "What was it again we ordered?" I asked Kip, who stared after the waitress. He seemed too preoccupied to answer, so I took a deep draw from my big mug. Usually I would sip the first taste of a new beer, but the powerful thirst and my obsession for it had gotten the better of me. Savoring the pleasure of the brew, I closed my eyes for a moment, allowing the dust and rigors of the road to fade.
You ordered the house special Drinkity Drunken Dwarven Draft, and mine was something called Dwarven Bread with a Head. The names are, let us say, colorful, at least. They seem to have a theme here,
Kip said.
What theme do they have, giving their beers god-awful names? I asked.
What is Dwarven Bread anyway?
Kip asked. Dwarven bread is a nickname of a variety of bread. It is baked with durability, not softness in mind. It is often so hard that one can chip off small pieces and suck on them for nourishment. It's made to last a long time. It was featured in a popular story, and now it has caught on as a survival ration for miners and travelers.
I wish I had asked before I ordered.
I poked at the odd beverage sitting in front of Kip and said, "You are living dangerously. The reputation of dwarven bread being what it is. I'm not sure how safe it would be in liquid form."
I thought it just a clever name.
Kip said,
I didn't know it was an actual attempt at creating a drinkable version of the stuff.
"In retrospect, I think the only time the story speaks of dwarven bread in liquid form was when it was used to stem the flow of lava during a volcanic eruption, so I'm not certain if it can even exist at room temperature." We both shared a laugh. Then, ignoring the possible consequences, I watched as Kip put the mug to his lips and tilted the tankard fully. Nothing seemed to happen. He pulled it away and looked again at the foam. It had only shifted slightly. He set the mug back on the table, and the surface of the foam began slowly to level off. Kip's eyebrows rose, and he said,
Seems that it has an extremely firm body for a beer. I'm just not sure how to drink it. Shall I ask for a spoon? Perhaps a chisel?
I nodded and chuckled at the ridiculous sight of him contemplating this strange brew. Resolved not to give up, Kip picked up the tankard again, tilted it, and shook it enthusiastically. This time the foam head eventually slid off the beer, fell onto the table, and quietly fizzled. The liquid in the mug barely moved. After a bit more effort, there was a sucking noise, and the entire quantity of beer slid out of the tankard and landed on the table. The strange brew kept the cylindrical shape of the vessel for a few seconds, and then slowly began bulging and flattening. Kip grabbed the brew off the table and worked it like putty for a minute. He rolled it between his hands and stuffed the substance back into the tankard. The beer slowly flattened and returned to its original shape. I delighted too much at his plight, and suddenly feeling impish, I drew a deep breath and blew the frothy head off my beer towards him in jest. But the shape of the tankard directed it back toward me, and the foam flew up and struck me full in the face. Both Kip and I burst out in hearty laughter, sharing the camaraderie of the moment. A few other patrons smiled to see what fun we were having. Out of pity for the lad, I signaled the waitress to bring him another beer. "I'll get the maid to bring you one of these drunkety dwarf drinks, too. It's actually a fine brew, everything a good beer should be." Kip nodded his thanks. It's time to do my job and take a real look at this beer. I pulled my notebook and tall, thin test glass from my sack and poured a measure of the beer into it. I held it up to the light and noted, "Nice, deep, dark brown color, slight cloudiness, lots of bubbles, good head, not too sweet, very nice indeed."
Conservator's note. As most of you probably know, Dell invented the modern rating scale for beer that we still use today. In one of Dell's many notebooks, we found reference to this beer and have inserted it here. Drinkity Drunken Dwarven Draft. Look, 3.5, smell, 4. Taste, 3.5, feel, 4.25. Overall, 3.75 served in, from keg into a pewter pint. Look, pours out a rich deep brown, 2 fingers of frothy beige head that sticks around for quite a while, very nice lacing. Smell, pretty nice, better than expected for a publican brew. Fairly sweet, led by toffee and vanilla, but also touches of dark roast coffee, rich chocolate, and toasted brown wheat. Taste, quite similar to the nose, black coffee and treacle led the way, with a stronger feel of biscuit and nutty malts. Something of an old ale twang mixes it up with a hint of astringency from the char flavor. As it breathes the toasted brown bread, flavor becomes stronger, and the coffee pulls all the way through the finish, rather than making way for nuttier flavors. Mouthfeel, much lighter than expected, and in a welcome way. Medium body, medium carbonation, light feel for the type. Above average drinkability, I could have a few. Overall, quite nice, and I wasn't really expecting much. A very nice balance between rich flavor and quaffability. I also get the impression that this may be a blended beer with some portion of old ale Irish, perhaps, which lightens it a bit and adds a bit of flair.
I passed the sample to Kip. What do you think? He took the sample glass, and after smelling it, he drank it down. Smiling, he agreed.
You need to write it up. Like you say, dark, full-bodied flavor, everything it should be, even a bit earthy flavored. It should at least get an honorable mention in the guide.
Kip smacked his lips in appreciation. A large man who had approached without our notice voiced his objection.
We haven't been adding earth to our drinks for ages, and as proprietor of this inn, I'll ask you to not restart any of those rumors.
Then, seeing the other tankard of liquid bread on our table, he suddenly recanted. He shot a glance at the barmaid, who was giggling.
Oh my, it's from the old menus, which were supposed to be destroyed.
He said loud enough for the maid to hear.
It appears the staff was having a bit of fun at your expense. My apologies. Please allow me to pick up your tab.
No apologies needed, I said. I respect a man who experiments with beer. There have to be failures along the way, or we never make discoveries.
You're very gracious, kind sir, and thank you. I am Cecil Totalmeyer, the owner of this establishment. I must admit I never knew a little quicklime would do that to beer. I thought it would counter the acid taste I was getting. Let me make sure you have our best.
He motioned for the maid to hurry, and she quickly set the new drink in front of Kip. We are experimenters in the art of brewing ourselves. You see, my friend and I are connoisseurs of fine beers and ales. We were merely commenting on the rich flavor of this hearty brew. The dwarfety drink one, not that other. Bread with a head stuff, of course. I tried to reassure the large man. A big smile opened on the proprietor's face.
Well, thank you. It's my own recipe. I based it on a brew I once had during my travels. Please enjoy the beer. It's what our inn is famous for. That, and of course, the song.
Song? I asked. The big innkeeper asked in disbelief.
You haven't heard of our song either? Well, you must come from a long way off.
Before I could answer, the man began to call out,
Uncle, wake up. Uncle's knees. We have a request for our song.
The old gray bard pulled his head up off the nearby table and fumbled with his ancient lute. He belched loudly, then cleared his throat as he looked around, grinning to be certain everyone had heard. Next, he turned his chair without standing, scooting its spindly legs in a circle. The chair made a loud scraping noise as it moved across the stone, and the legs bent at impossible angles, finally coming to rest so that he could see us.
You are in for a real treat. I love this song. It's so exciting to share it with new people.
The innkeeper said, smiling. The bard started strumming a lilting, repetitive melody, which began as always with the chorus.
Drunkety-dwarf, he drank a draft, a drankety-drink, he drank, and every time he drank a drop, a drankety-draft, he drunk. Drunkety-dwarf, he drank a draft, a drankety-drink, he drank, and every time he drank a drop, a drankety-draft, he drunk.
After the song was finished, the proprietor stared at us in expectation of a response.
How did you like it?
He finally asked. A huge smile covered his face.
Yes, a good song. I'm sure it will be stuck in my head for days.
Kip said, trying to be polite.
Yes, people say it does that, and that was the short version. Would you like it to hear the long one?
The proprietor began to motion to the bard. I cut him off. No, thank you. We have taken too much of your attention already. You have other guests and patrons to attend. I won't hear of you wasting another moment on us. I believe that man over there, I pointed at another man who was sitting across the room, had a complaint about your privy. The heavyset proprietor turned his head and began walking in the direction of the pointed finger, searching for the man described.
Oh yes, I'll get right on it,
he said, and wandered off in that direction. Kip and I slid over to the bard's table, hoping that if the man returned, he might have difficulty finding us there. It really was a fair song. It's just that a little of it seems to stretch a very long way, I said to the bard. The bard grimaced and said under his breath,
If you only knew the truth of it, my good man, I sometimes curse the day it first came into my head.
Sensing a good story, I asked, So did you write the Drunken Dwarfity song?
I'll have you know I meant no disrespect to the little folk such as yourself. I truly mean no offense, good sir.
No offense taken, good bard. I am a short man, yes. Some even call me dwarf, but be assured I am human. Dwarves are not a separate race of people. They are men who have inherited their short stature from their human parents. 'Tis a common misconception, and I'll never fault an honest man's ignorance so long as he is respectful. Therefore, think no more of it. I would like to hear the story of your song, and how a public house came to be named for it.
Fair enough. Sit back and enjoy your drink, and I shall share the story. It was some 20 years ago. I was playing with the melody, and on a whim I put the verse together. Soon it became a local favorite hereabouts, and I could hardly play an inn without every man there asking me to favor him a play of it. Then later this man, Mr. Totalmer, whom you just met, paid me for the name. He said he wanted to open an inn and thought that it would be nice if it could be like the place where the dwarf in the song spent his life drinking. Kind of a beer drinking theme park, whatever that means. He offered me free room and board if I would perform the song each night. Well, to a poor bard who missed meals often and seldom had the comfort of a fire by which to sleep, it sounded very good. I've been here ever since. Later, he named his best house ale for it and even hired a dwarf, short man, to pose as its brewer and work in his brew house. Now he's been experimenting with beer, giving them ridiculous names, and I have been singing that song ever since. I must have sung that cursed song every hour for the last 5 years.
I gave the man a smile, patted him on the back, and slipped a few extra coins in his hat. Getting the attention of the barmaid, I motioned for another round, for us and for the bard. Then I looked at the man to be certain he didn't object. Then he said, nodding appreciatively,
Oh, the beer is fine, it's just the song that I've tired of. But it's a regular gig, so I shouldn't complain. I'm too old to go traveling around seeking adventure and sleeping across bar stools. Hurts my back just thinking about it.
He sat listening for a few minutes, enjoying the music and the fresh draught the waitress had delivered. This time she whispered something into Kip's ear, and he turned as red as her hair. She walked away again, swinging her hips a bit more than usual. Looks like you have found an admirer, Kip. What did she say? I asked.
A gentleman never reveals such things.
He said, still blushing. Did you offer to show her your drawings? Perhaps she is interested in our beer research, I said, not wanting to let a good chance to tease him pass. The bard winked at us and said,
Did I overhear you say that you were researching great beers and ales in your travels?
We are composing a guide of all the great drafts in the known world. I am the author. I go by the name Del Brewan, and Kip here is my illustrator. I prompted Kip to pull out his portfolio of recent sketches from the clerics of Mallowhedge. The bard looked through them with polite interest.
Well then, since you have been so generous, I have a rare brew for you and a story.
He pulled an empty bottle from his pack and handed it to me. Pictured on the front was a gallant mounted knight in full armor. Bottled beer was still a bit of a novelty, and the earthenware bottles were often saved for the pictures fired into the clay.
I wrote the story after I spoke with a man who came through here several months ago selling these expensive beers. He was trying to get Mr. Totalmeyer to add them to his menu. He, of course, refused since he felt it would clash with the ambience he worked so hard to capture in this rundown privy of an inn. Would you like to hear it?
We would be most honored.
Kip said while I nodded.
The man began his verse. Although not a song, he strummed his lute in accompaniment as he wove his words.
The Lost Brew of the Paladins. Legends long lost extolled the mysterious brew, known only to pure knights, just a few. Its secret to share was most heinous of treason. Dire cases of need were the brew's only reason. By aid of this liquid, holy knights did subsist. Still, rumors and legends of its power persist. The abbots of Mamir brewed the liquid so rare. For centuries monks toiled to make ale that was fair. Readied in secret, in oak barrels they'd stack. In cold tombs of a cellar, kegs aging in black. In forests beyond the abbey, covered by ferns, to the Canterhead wildlands our story now turns. Dark Canterhead is a place a goodly man loathes. Monstrous creatures dwell amidst its gnarled sylvan groves. 10 merchantmen blundered into the cursed place. Enraged by their trespass, a vile worm gave them chase. As happens in legends, though all chance it defy, at that very moment, a strong knight happened by. Dazzled by his gleaming, that foul spawn with him fought, whilst the pureness of blade through scaled hide entry sought. The knight's armour it blinded with a sunlit flash, mortally struck the dark serpent deep with a gash. The gold knight split open the beast's scaly venter. Its life force gushed out of its vile, putrid centre. Disemboweled and beheaded, it writhed in its gore. Its spirit poured out until it breathed nevermore. The knight's eyes now turned to the men who lay dying. Found amongst the corpses, a lone man still vying. The unfortunate man's wounds so grievous, he'd groan. Over the man, the knight a prayer did intone. A golden flask, the knight unsealed and unfastened, he poured the brew sacred onto his face ashen. At once the poor man, old Killigan revived. That brew was as fair and pure as he'd e'er imbibed. He jumped up from the ground upon which he'd just laid. No pain did he feel, though his raw flesh was flayed. Killigan's face at once glowed, suffused with a smile. He thanked the knight for killing the creature so vile. Seeing that still, the man's wounds dreadfully severe, the knight took him to the good abbots of Malmere. Weeks they passed slowly as the little man mended, sipping holy brew given by monks who attended. Killigan, a brewer of mead, beer, and ale, this master obsessed about this liquid so pale. When at last he'd recovered, the little man asked of the brew and its wonders in which he had basked. The monks would not answer him for fear of their vow. To give him this secret they would never allow. In darkness each night, the brewer crept all about, in the hallways and cellars, for clues he would scout. His search was rewarded, a note tattered and stained. A recipe it seemed, though it hadn't been named. Its ingredients and method he made copy. A charcoal he used despite smudgy, all sloppy. The final day arrived when he left the good monks. A copy of the secret he'd hid in his trunks. He journeyed back home, and his brewery long missed. He gathered the grains for the unusual grist. Pained he was, lacking holy water to imbue, so he boiled the devil from a measure or two. The script next called for fine hops chosen by prayer, so while roasting the grains, he tried hard not to swear. The barley it needed was refined and quite rare, but instead he just used whatever grain he could spare. It called next for a thing the monks had called manna, so he substituted a bean known as guarana. Implementing the long process kept him toiling. He finished the brew by heating without boiling. At last, it was done, and he tasted a sample, satisfied he'd made it in quantities ample. The brew's impact, it struck him. He stood straight and tall. Its energy suffused him, a potent cure-all. Anxious to share it with taverns and inns nearby, he brought them in samples for their patrons to try. First, they'd puzzled its missing intoxication. Each drunk it sobered to a state of elation. 'Twas sweet and invigorating, this it was true, but lacked fun, like bar patrons were apt to imbue. Demand for the lively potion never caught on. This result made old Killigan sad and withdrawn. Wretched paladins' soberness couldn't be hidden. Their holiness and virtue shone through unbidden. People in taverns were not towards it inclined. Its most suitable drinkers he had yet to find. Some kept it on hand for old knights with a title. For each designated coachman, it was vital. A vast supply of it yet lingers in storage. But Killigan still struggles to pay his mortgage. Yet the old brewer, he still travels all about, touting the wonders of this most marvelous stout.
After he finished, he took a long draw on the mug that had waited patiently while he'd performed. We both applauded the bard. Very fine story indeed. The bard bowed his head slightly.
I wish the song had a better ending, but that's what I have of it.
Then, struck by inspiration, I asked, "Where can we find this Killigan that you speak of in this song? Is he a real person or just made up? I would like to learn more of his tale and this unusual beverage."
He is real enough, and he said he was from near about Freyhurst town. Though I don't know where that is exactly, I do know it is to the north, if that helps. If you find him, tell him I'd like some more of his brew, since it helps me stay awake in this wretched place.
The rest of that night until wee hours, we shared stories and songs. Somehow, I managed to find my bed and slept until late morning when Kip made his appearance, quiet about his whereabouts the previous night. We spoke about the Killigan and how it would be an interesting story for the Gazette. Thus, we decided to pursue the bard's story. We departed after noon on the road going north, anxious to find Freyhurst town and this man named Killigan. We traveled north several days and camped along the way. The third night of our trip, we shared a fire with a traveling group of clerics. The clerics were kind enough also to share their keg, and we all had a fine time. During the evening, I gave them a few of the tales my search for great beers had gained me. The clerics were impressed and agreed my book was a worthy quest. They proceeded to tell us stories of the fine brews they had sampled during their travels, and I carefully recorded the details in my notebook for possible future research trips. After the keg was nearly drained, I told them of our new quest for Tale of Pallie Ale and recounted the bard's tale. The clerics were more than interested. They knew of Freyhurst and gave us good directions to the town. They also mentioned that they themselves had a steady need for such a brew. It was for the students in their clerical school. While the students are in training, alcohol was forbidden by school rules, yet they still have a powerful thirst for beer. They would in fact buy as much as they could find of such a non-spirited brew, if it was as the bard had said. I assured them I would tell Killigan of their need if we found him. We bid the goodly men farewell the next morning, and made our way north toward the city of Freyhurst. It was a fair day, and we made good progress, stopping only a few times along the road to enjoy the hard cheese and bread we had brought along to sustain us. Arriving late at our destination late evening, we found a bed for the night and fell fast asleep, worn out from the trip. The next morning, I woke to a tumult of people in the streets. I had expected Freyhurst to be a quiet town of quiet folk, but something was amiss. I dressed quickly and woke Kip, and we went out to discover the reason for all the noise. Stopping a man who was hurriedly trying to roll a big barrel down the potholed street, I asked the cause of the commotion.
They finally come to get Killigan and were hiding their stores of Pallie Ale in case they come into town.
The little man said, almost out of breath. "Who have come for him?" I asked.
Don't be daft, the Paladin Knights, of course. They arrived early this morning, and his workers are all fled the town to warn everyone. They said the Paladins are going to hang Killigan for stealing the recipe.
He began looking over his shoulder, anxious to get moving again. I did manage to get directions to the brewery from the panicked man before he resumed his frantic, "Excuse me, gentlemen."
I'm sorry, Del. We appear to have run out of time for this episode. That brings us to the end of part 1 of our stout tale of Pallie Ale. Will Del and Kip uncover the truth behind the miraculous brew, or has the secret been lost to history? Join us next time for the exciting conclusion of the Tale of Pallie Ale, the very first story in our Stout Tales series.
A drink and he draft, he drunk.